All right, surprisingly, I was actually surprised that the audience picked this topic for us to talk to. So again, patreon.com/the3wonks, become a member if you want to say in what we talk about on a week-to-week basis. The audience topic for this week that was voted on by the Patreon members was Trump's tax plan. So Trump recently, he made this sort of offhanded comment about replacing the income tax with tariffs, essentially getting rid of the income tax, all the revenue that we raise, and replacing it with tariffs. I don't know how much needs to be said about this. We've talked about tariffs a lot on our podcast before, but certainly this is a much more bombastic idea of replacing the income tax with tariffs. Now, some context for this is that Trump has already he's currently running on a platform explicitly of universal tariffs. So he says everything we import, 10%. I think he's used figures like that before. We're going to put a 10% tariff, 5% tariff on basically every product that we import. And now he's just floated the much more extreme, insane idea of putting tariffs to be so high that in theory you could replace the income tax with it. Now there's a lot of problems with that. One thing that I'll point out right off the bat is that it seems to literally be impossible to do that, right? That you couldn't replace the amount of revenue that you raise from tariffs with the you couldn't replace the amount of revenue you raise with the income tax with tariffs, right? We import about I think we import about $1 trillion a year worth of stuff, and even if you had 100% tariff on everything that was imported in the country, that wouldn't be enough revenue to eclipse the income tax. And one thing that's important to think about when we're thinking about tariffs is that these also have compositional effects, right? I mean, the point of tariffs is that you import less things when you put tariffs on things, right? And so if you put 100% tariff, like in theory, if you said, we have this much imports, we're just going to put, percentage tax equals to the amount of income tax that we raise currently, and this, whatever that percentage tax comes out to, that's what we end up raising. The problem with that is that practically that's never going to happen, because even if you did that math and said, oh, we need a 250% tariff on all imports to raise the amount of revenue that we get from the income tax, people are going to import a lot less things if all of a sudden importing things is 2.5 times more expensive, right? So, and that's not to mention that your tax base is going to take a shit if you do something like that, because the economy would fucking come to a grinding halt if you actually did tariffs that high. The universal tariffs plan already would cause economic stagnation, much less tariffs that high. Micah, what do you have to say about this plan? Overall, those are my thoughts, plus the distributional effects are quite bad, and we can talk about that a bit later, but what are your thoughts?
This is probably one of the worst tax proposals anybody could ever come up with. It is truly remarkable. Tariffs are close to the most inefficient tax. And as you said, tariffs of this magnitude simply could not replace the income tax. I mean, probably the revenue maximizing tariff rate would be something like 65 to 100%, which would be absolutely disastrous for the price level, be extraordinarily regressive, and be disastrous for the economy. Because it's not just about the products we import, it's about the inputs we import. Those price hikes are not just going to be on foreign goods, but they're going to be on domestic goods that use foreign inputs, which are almost all domestic goods. And so it not only would it do those things, but it also caused massive unemployment. This is something that I think we need to talk about a lot more on the free trade side. People think, or they talk about protectionism as if it's bringing jobs home. What it does do is it shifts the composition of the economy. Every shift of the composition of the economy creates jobs and destroys jobs, usually in equal measure over time. Whenever we opened up trade to countries like China and to other developing countries, you saw shifts in the composition of the economy, reductions of domestic manufacturing, and increases in the production of services and exporting industries. And of course, people are laid off in the meantime, and it's painful and it's hard, but eventually most of those people get reemployed in these growing sectors. In this case, if we had this tremendous increase in protectionism, we'd have a movement in the reverse. We would have a tremendous amounts of job losses in exporting industries and services. And then there would be an increase in domestic manufacturing over time. But there would be tons of economic pain in the short term. And because we don't have a social safety net, some people will not be reemployed. There is no safety net to catch them. And so whenever they lose their job, they might fall prone to opioid addiction, substance abuse, crime, long-term unemployment, loss of skill and human capital. This is the kind of stuff that happens when you have big economic transformations. So I really think Democrats would do well to explain to people just how disastrous of a proposal this is, because it is 10 out of 10 terrible idea.
Yeah, it's a really bad idea, and it's not to mention that I don't know why Democrats haven't mentioned this. Biden mentioned it a little bit in the debate, but he really should have hammered on this. This isn't just a bad proposal for all the economic effects that we talked about, all the mass unemployment and all the inefficiencies created by this. It's also bad because it's the largest tax increase on middle and lower income Americans ever proposed by a president. And the thing is, you're not getting anything out of it, right? Like Bernie, he was honest in saying taxes on the middle class are going to have to go up in order to pay for Medicare for all. Now, whether you believe in Medicare for all or not, whether you think that's the best way to organize our healthcare system, it is something that you are getting for the taxes that you are paying, right? It is a thing that you get, even if you think that the thing you're getting is not worth the tax you're paying. Fair, it's you're made in some part whole financially, right? This is just strictly a tax increase on almost every American. The only people, and I talked about this on my channel, actually, there was an analysis done by an institute, which just, it's very intuitive if you think about it, but there's an institute that did an analysis on this. The only people who benefit, who actually end up paying less in taxes than they would end up paying in the increase in prices of goods and services because of these increases in tariffs, are literally people making six figures and above. It's just the highest income people. Everyone else ends up paying substantially more in taxation. So forget about the fact that you have direct job losses incurred because of all of these tariffs. Forget about the fact that in an inflation epidemic that people on the right wing of the party or right wing of the political spectrum are talking about all the time, that you're advocating for a policy that directly increases the prices of all goods and services. You're literally advocating for a huge tax increase as well amongst lower income people, right? Now, the stupidest argument that conservatives and libertarians will make in defense of this proposal, it's ironic in 2024 we have libertarians defending a universal tariff policy. The stupidest argument that they'll make is, well, Econoboy Micah, we like the fact that tariffs don't raise as much revenue because that means the government has to be a lot smaller. But here's the thing, I don't know if how do I put this? If I thought I was running too fast and I thought, it's dangerous how fast I'm running, the best way for me to stop running so fast isn't to shoot myself in the foot or to cut my leg off. I can just choose to run less fast, right? I can just slow my speed that I'm running. And so if you're a libertarian or you're a conservative who says, well, I don't believe in these expansive government services, I don't believe in this high tax burden, hey, guess what? You can just lower income taxes. You can just decrease the amount of spending on social services. You don't have to destroy the entire economy with universal high tariffs in order to achieve your goal of a smaller government, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Right. So just to summarize, huge job losses, huge increase in prices and robbery of lower and middle income Americans, a huge increase in the national debt, a huge decrease in gross domestic output, and necessarily big cuts to essential government spending on whether it be the military, whether it be healthcare, Medicare, Social Security, cuts across the board. And not even that would be sufficient, though.
But Micah, really quick, something that's worth pointing out in your analysis here is that Trump has not talked about eliminating payroll taxes. So the incredibly interesting part about the people who think that this plan in theory would cause smaller government is the largest buckets of spending that the U.S. government does, period, Medicare and Social Security, would, at least in theory, right, not be cut because of this, because we'd still be collecting payroll taxes. So what is all the other things that the government spends on that aren't Social Security and Medicare? The military, other healthcare spending that's not paid for with FICA taxes, education, transitively, and this is something that Biden could also hit Trump on, in order to get rid of the income tax, you'd have to cut non-mandatory spending. So are we gonna cut the military budget in half, Mr. Republican? Are we gonna get rid of all education spending? Are we going to get rid of all food stamps? Right? These are the things that would have to be cut in this world. Or obviously you'd have to bite the bullet of cutting Social Security and cutting Medicare substantially and redistributing payroll tax money to pay for everything else. Transitively paying for like the military with a payroll tax instead of income tax. And so
Right.
it's just it's a poorly thought out policy that I don't imagine Trump, he's not going to get rid of the income tax if he's president. Would he do universal tariffs? I have every reason to believe that he would, and that would be disastrous enough. But it's just one of those things where you've got a presidential candidate who is suggesting something that he doesn't even seem to understand would be bad. Like if Trump was proposed, the only reason Trump does not sign a bill that gets rid of the income tax and replaces it with tariffs is because all the people smarter around him won't allow that bill to be presented to him. But if Trump was presented that bill, he would likely sign it. And I think it's just a little precarious to have the president be so stupid when it comes to at least like very foundationally basic economic policy, right? Like it's kind of ridiculous.
Right. And let's keep in mind, the Republican Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Trump's signature piece of legislation, was written almost exclusively by the kind of center-right Republicans which no longer have a home in the Republican Party. Paul Ryan, the former Speaker of the House, who is now an open opponent of Trump and critic of Trump, was the mastermind behind that piece of legislation. Certainly, in the new Trump era, any future tax bill would be much worse. One without any of the pro-growth provisions, any of the attempts to streamline the tax code, and exclusively the kind of right-wing, populist, anti-economy, anti-growth nonsense which defines Trump's GOP.
Yep, exactly. It's just overall just a terrible, awful idea. Now, to be fair, it does give the Democrats a lot of room to criticize the absolute shit out of Donald Trump, because again, I mean, that's one thing it's unbelievable to me that the Democrats haven't taken a more aggressive stance and aggressive posture when it comes to this proposal, is because for years we've heard, oh, the Democrats are going to tax you more, and implicitly it's always been they're going to tax you more to pay for all these government services, right? It's never like the Democrats have never just been like, yep, we're going to tax you more because why not? That's never been the proposal of Democrats. That's never been anything Democrats have ever proposed, right? But Republicans, at this point, the state of the Republican Party is they can come out and say, yeah, we're just going to tax lower income people a lot more. Period. Right? And we're also going to destroy the economy while we do it. Like, even if you believed in taxing middle and lower income people more, you could just raise the income tax on them, right? But the idea is like, we're going to tax lower and middle income people a lot more and destroy the economy while we do it. While we do it.
Right.
Like, what the hell?
It's clearly absurd. And, I think the most insane thing to me is that Trump can propose stuff like this, and we still look at the businesses of America, and it still seems like they're more in the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. And I think that's more of a problem of outreach and messaging on our part than on, and also on common sense on their part, because Trump has shown consistently to not understand what good economic management looks like. He's the guy who said he's going to renegotiate the national debt and practically default on it. And we had a stock market crash when he was president, when he said that same day, because this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And so businesses might not like that Biden takes, a more anti-monopoly, antitrust stance, a slightly more pro-labor stance, and slightly more pro-tax stance. But there's a huge difference between the kind of center-left, pro-worker policy that Biden's putting forward and the absolute chaos and destruction agenda that Trump and his sycophants are putting forward.
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons why I said before the segment started, but we were recording the show, is like it's like, dude, I dare the Republicans to actually enact this platform. I dare them to. Right? Because it will fucking lead to the destruction of the Republican Party. Like, it will lead to the Democrats getting 65% of the vote in the subsequent presidential election. I mean, we can't overestimate how disastrous a policy like this would be. Like, already, like, here are my realistic predictions if Trump actually implemented a 10% tariff on all imports. My realistic predictions, right? So this is, Is social anarchy going to be caused by a 10% tariffs on all goods coming into the country? No, right? But will it lead to economic stagnation? Will it lead to higher prices than otherwise are being paid, higher levels of inflation? Will it lead to a much more unequal economic system? I mean, the answer to all these questions is almost certainly yes, right? And here's the big kicker. Is it going to lead to a lot more manufacturing employment? No, it's not, right? There's no way that it will. It'll fail to accomplish that goal, even if that is your goal. You know, if you believe in domestic manufacturing, right? The best way to do that is the stuff that Biden has done, right? It's just doing public investments in things like domestic manufacturing, right? There's no reason to make every single consumer product that we can think of much more expensive. Just you know what, to play to a pro-populist, pro-manufacturing base. It's just not the smartest way to secure domestic manufacturing. It's certainly not the most equitable way to do it, for goodness sake. It's not the most effective either. So
it's to play at about 5% of the population in like 4 swing states, which is just yet another huge condemnation of our political system, where the interests and beliefs of a very small percentage of the population are elevated so much above the interests and beliefs of the rest of the population.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate, but you know, we'll see. If, like I said, if Trump gets elected and enacts that platform, amongst other things on his platform, I think he'll leave office with a 25-30% approval rating. And he'll also, you know, we'll have an FDR level of if Trump did his whole platform, minus the destroying democracy thing, assuming we have a next election, there will be an FDR level of fucking Democrats in the Senate. And that is when shit is going to get real nice after that, if that does happen.
Well, let's hope we don't undergo that chaos and destruction for our good. The whole point of winning elections is to make things better. And so if things have to become much worse in order for us to win, that would be a little bit unfortunate. But I would say that I really do hope there's more of a concerted effort by Democrats. And I think you're seeing a little bit of this, to just let businesses know that, yeah, we're supportive of labor, but that doesn't mean that we can't be better for you than the Republicans. Some have gotten the message, but really 90% of businesses should be in the Democratic column for this election. It really shouldn't be any question.
Yeah, for sure. And to be fair, a lot of the stuff that we advocate for on this show would lead to that happening, more likely, right? Where it's like, we advocate for a more efficient tax code that's less focused on corporate entities and more focused on actually wealthy people and wealthy people's consumption, and state capacity. One of the reasons why countries like in the Nordic countries have such advantageous business environments relative to their level of taxation and their level of regulation is because they have really, really high levels of state capacity and efficiency when it comes to regulating and managing those regulations, right? So it's like, hey, if you're going to have like a robust regulatory state, having a lot of state capacity to manage and wade through those regulations is really, really important. And so doing stuff like that, although anti-business in some sort of intrinsic sense, sure, is pro-business ultimately in a net sense, because you get a more efficient tax code. And even if you have a problem with state regulators, the remedies and the speed at which you would get answers to very important questions is very, very high. So for instance, the last thing that I'll say is a lot of the times when bills get passed, government agencies have to interpret and actually apply those bills. A lot of times that takes forever. So for instance, the IRA, they passed this domestic manufacturing energy community bonus credits for renewable energy. So if you build a renewable energy plant in a coal community, or if you build that plant with American parts, you get extra subsidies, right? But now the federal agencies, they have to interpret, well, what does that actually mean, right? It literally took like a year plus for them to just release what do they actually mean. And so for that entire year, all these companies and all these businesses were like, what do we do? Like, we don't know exactly if we qualify for this or that. Like, we could invest in this project if we get extra subsidies, but we can't if we don't, and we don't know if we do, so we can't make the investment. Like, all these things get delayed. And even though you're trying to do a good thing, the lack of state capacity ends up really hurting your ultimate ability to provide that investment and that subsidy. So these are the things that Democrats hopefully can get a little bit more behind, and get more business leaders to be in favor of them. So
The great thing about an agenda focused on government efficiency and pro-growth policies that everybody benefits. You're not taking anything from anyone to give to someone else. There's no trade-off. Everybody's made better off. And that's why it's the most exciting area of policy for me, because, spoiler alert, in America, the government is not efficient. We have over 100 welfare programs, not very efficient. We have a tax code that is, by all accounts, miserably inefficient, and spending programs all over the place that are miserably inefficient. And so there's so many what might seem as small gains that can be made for the public by some of these changes to our administration of, say, the permitting system or a change of regulations, but they add up. And if you do them all, the impact can be really tremendous, and it can be tremendously positive for pretty much all groups in America, except for those that work in the bureaucracy and the tax lawyers and those who are employed in navigating the complexity of the system.